All right, so welcome back for another deep dive. And this time, we're going to be tackling a case that really had everyone talking. The murder of Dr. Teresa Severs. You guys sent us a bunch of audio from Wondery's podcast, 48 Hours, The Plot to Kill Dr. Severs. And let me tell you, this story is absolutely wild.
Oh, yeah. This one is a real doozy. I mean, talk about a case that just makes you question everything you thought you knew about trust and how well you really know the people in your life.
So picture this. Teresa, she's a holistic doctor, successful, strong personality, you know the type, comes home to Florida after a family vacation, walks into her house, and it's been broken into. But it's not just a robbery. She's found brutally murdered in her own kitchen.
And not just murdered, we're talking brutally bludgeoned with a hammer.
Yeah, it's pretty gruesome stuff.
And this is where things start to get really weird.
Yeah, like how so?
Well, they find signs of forced entry, right? So you immediately think, okay, maybe a burglary gone wrong. But then they find Mark's, that's her husband, gun collection, completely untouched.
Wait, what?
Not a single gun missing. And to make things even more bizarre, there's a stash of $40,000 in cash just sitting there out in the open.
Okay, so that definitely throws a wrench in the burglary theory.
Right. This just doesn't add up. Why go through all the trouble of staging a break-in, committing a brutal murder, but then leave behind valuable stuff like that?
It's almost like...
Like they wanted it to look like a robbery, but they were really after something else. Or someone else.
Okay, so let's talk about Mark Severs, the husband. In the podcast, he comes across as this really heartbroken, devoted guy, completely shattered by his wife's death, right?
Yeah, initially he seemed totally cooperative with the police. He presented himself as this loving husband, doting father, just completely devastated.
And the kicker, he had what seemed like a rock-solid alibi.
Oh, yeah. He was with their 2 daughters and Teresa's family in Connecticut when the murder happened. So, physically, there's no way he could have been in 2 places at once.
So, with Mark seemingly in the clear, the investigators start digging into other potential leads. They look at Teresa's patients. She had a bit of a strong personality, so they're thinking maybe there's a disgruntled patient out there who might have wanted to,
Yeah, get revenge. I mean, you heard in the podcast how some people found her a bit abrasive. Maybe not your typical warm and fuzzy doctor, right?
Exactly. And they even looked into Teresa's medical assistant, Sandra Hoskins, who had just given her notice and was planning to leave the practice. There were even some rumors floating around, fueled by Teresa's sister, that Sandra might have had something to do with it.
Yeah, but ultimately, the investigators didn't find any solid evidence to connect either of those angles to the crime.
So it's like they're back to square one.
Yeah, the case goes cold for a bit, but then bam! 2 months after the murder, they make arrests, but not in Florida.
Wait, what? Where then?
Over 1,000 miles away in Missouri.
Seriously? What? So these guys just took a road trip to commit a murder and then hightailed it back?
Well, it seems that way. The 2 guys they arrested were Jimmy Ray Rogers and Curtis Wainwright. And get this.
Oh boy, here we go.
Curtis Wainwright. He looked almost exactly like Mark Severs, like they could be twins.
Wait a minute, are you serious? The husband's best friend is the prime suspect, and he looks just like him.
Oh yeah, the plot thickens, right. And as if that wasn't crazy enough, it turns out that Wayne and Mark had been best friends since childhood. Grew up together back in Missouri, the whole 9 yards.
So they were like thick as thieves, huh?
Yeah, practically inseparable. And you know what else? Wayne was a frequent visitor to the Severs home in Florida. He'd often help them with their computers, stuff like that.
So he was in their inner circle.
Very much so. And hold on to your hats because this next part is going to blow your mind. Wayne was even present at Teresa's funeral, standing there with the rest of the grieving family.
Wow, that's just chilling. Okay, so let's talk about Jimmy the Hammer Rogers for a second. This guy already had a bit of a rap sheet, right?
Oh, yeah. Jimmy had a history, and wouldn't you know it, his nickname was the Hammer. Talk about a red flag.
You can't make this stuff up. And what's his story? Why was he in Florida?
Well, he told his boss he was going to a graduation, but told his girlfriend he was going to make some money with Wayne.
Okay, so somebody isn't telling the truth here.
Yeah, those inconsistent stories are never a good sign. It's like screaming, I'm hiding something.
And remember how we talked about the role of technology in this whole thing?
Oh, yeah, the digital trail.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. The rental car that Wayne and Jimmy used for their trip, it had a GPS tracker. And that data ended up being like gold for the investigator.
Oh, yeah, that GPS data was the key that unlocked the whole case. It gave them a minute-by-minute timeline of Wayne and Jimmy's movements, placing them at the Severs home at the exact time of the murder.
And I bet it wasn't pretty.
Nope, not pretty at all. The data showed them picking up the rental car, driving straight to the Severs house, making a quick stop at a Walmart, then heading to the beach, and finally hightailing it back to Missouri.
Sounds like a pretty incriminating road trip.
Oh, it gets worse. Remember that Walmart stop? Investigators looked into what they bought: trash bags, cleaning supplies, a lock-picking kit.
Whoa, hold on. Are we talking premeditation here?
It certainly looks that way, like they were planning on cleaning up the crime scene and making it look like something it wasn't.
But the real bombshell comes from Jimmy's girlfriend, Taylor Showmaker. She ends up becoming a key witness in the case and tells investigators that Jimmy actually confessed to the murder.
Yeah, can you imagine your boyfriend comes home and tells you he just killed someone? That's got to be a lot to process.
Seriously. And what did he say exactly?
Well, according to Taylor, Jimmy told her that he was hired to do it and was supposed to get paid like $10,000.
So this wasn't just a random act of violence.
Nope, it seems like a carefully planned hit.
And Taylor didn't just hear about it. She helped Jimmy get rid of evidence too, right?
Oh, yeah, like his broken cell phone, gloves, the jumpsuit he wore. She even described how she helped him smash his phone to bits.
Talk about a chilling level of involvement.
And the plot just keeps thickening. Remember that $40,000 in cash they found at the Severs house? Well, it turns out they weren't exactly rolling in dough. The investigators uncovered a ton of debt.
Wait, so they had all that cash lying around but were secretly in financial trouble.
Yep, pretty strange, right? It just adds another layer of intrigue to the whole story.
And then comes the biggest twist of all.
The insurance policies.
Oh yeah, the life insurance policies on Teresa. 5 of them totaling over $4 million.
Suddenly that picture of Mark as the grieving husband starts to look a little less convincing, doesn't it?
Okay, so this is where things get really complicated. We've got Jimmy Rogers, the Hammer, confessing to the murder but potentially being just a hired hand. We've got Wayne Wright, the best friend doppelganger who's throwing Mark under the bus. And we've got Mark Severs, the husband with the rock-solid alibi, but also with a potential motive, and a best friend who just happens to look exactly like him.
It's like something out of a movie. But this is real life, and the stakes are incredibly high.
So the question becomes, who's telling the truth?
Yeah.
And what really happened to Dr. Teresa Severs?
All right, so we're back, and we're picking up right where we left off, this tangled web of murder, betrayal, and some seriously shady characters.
With 2 guys behind bars and a husband who's looking more and more suspicious, the big question is, what was the motive here?
Well, the prosecution's case really zeroed in on that financial angle, remember?
Oh yeah, those life insurance policies, 5 of them on Teresa, totaling over $4 million.
Exactly. Add that to the fact that they were secretly drowning in debt, and, well, it paints a pretty compelling picture, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, but I'm still stuck on the brutality of it all. If it was all about the money, why not stage it to look like an accident?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I mean, 17 hammer blows to the head. That screams rage, passion, something a lot more personal than just wanting to cash in on an insurance policy.
So let's unpack this a bit. Let's start with Jimmy Rogers, the Hammer himself. I mean, sure, he had a record, but was this guy really capable of something this horrific?
Well, he did confess to Taylor, his girlfriend, and he did have that nickname, and a history of violence. So it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility, is it?
True, but there's also that possibility that he was, like, manipulated or coerced into doing it, right?
Oh, absolutely, and that's what makes this whole thing so tricky. We've got his confession, yeah, but does that tell the whole story? Was he acting on his own? Or was he taking orders from someone else?
Someone like Wayne Wright, maybe?
Ah, yes, Wayne, the doppelganger best friend. Now that's a character we need to dissect a little further. Seriously. I mean, what are the chances that Mark's best friend also happens to be his lookalike and is now the prime suspect in his wife's murder?
Talk about a bizarre twist. And then there's the whole question of his motive, too.
Right.
Yeah, like, was he really this evil mastermind calling the shots? Or was he, like Mark's family claims, this jealous friend obsessed with taking over Mark's life?
It's like trying to solve a puzzle where half the pieces are missing.
Okay, so on the one hand, we've got Wayne, the computer guy, the one who could have easily covered his tracks online. He admits to killing Teresa and points the finger squarely at Mark. It's almost too perfect, like he's trying to save his own skin by selling out his friend.
And that plea deal doesn't exactly help his case, does it? I mean, who wouldn't try to spin a story to get a lighter sentence?
Right, but then you've got Mark's family, and they're adamant that he's innocent, that Wayne is the one who's lying. They claim Wayne was jealous, wanted Mark's life, his family, everything, and they point to all those details. The way Wayne tried to look like Mark, his constant presence in their lives, It's creepy, to be honest.
Yeah, and let's not forget about that whole unsolved mystery with Wayne's former friend, Ronnie Bolin, who just vanished. Wayne was never charged or anything, but it definitely makes you wonder, doesn't it?
It definitely adds to the whole Wayne is a shady character vibe. I mean, could it be that he saw Teresa as a problem, as someone standing between him and the life he wanted with Mark?
It's a disturbing thought, but it's definitely a possibility. And then, of course, there's Mark, the husband, at the center of it all.
Yeah, so was he really this desperate guy, backed into a corner and convinced that killing his wife was the only way out?
Well, the evidence against him is mostly circumstantial, but it's pretty damning when you add it all up. The money problems, those insurance policies, his connection to Wayne, and of course, Wayne's testimony placing him at the scene.
But there's no smoking gun, right? He wasn't there when it happened, and there's no confession. So his defense team argues that he was set up, betrayed by his supposed best friend.
They basically painted a picture of Mark as this trusting guy who was completely blindsided by Wayne's actions. I mean, think about it. Wayne was a computer expert. He was close to Mark. It wouldn't have been that hard to make Mark look guilty, would it?
And to be fair to Mark, he has always maintained his innocence throughout the entire thing, from day one.
And his family has stood by him every step of the way, convinced that he was wrongly accused.
It's a classic case of he said, she said, right. Two completely different stories, two families torn apart, and the truth somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. And in the end, it all comes down to who the jury believes.
And in this case, they believe the prosecution. They found Mark guilty of first-degree murder.
Which means they were convinced that it was premeditated, that it wasn't a crime of passion, but a carefully planned act.
And to really drive home the point, the jury recommended the death penalty.
Wow, they didn't hold back, did they? That shows you just how strongly they believed that he was the one who orchestrated Teresa's death.
So after all the twists and turns, all the conflicting stories, the trials, the convictions, where does the truth lie? Was Mark Severs a desperate husband who made a horrific choice? Or was he the victim of a friend's deadly ambition?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And as you continue listening to the podcast, I'm sure you'll be wrestling with that very question yourself.
We've laid out the evidence, the testimonies, the different perspectives,
Yeah.
but ultimately, it's up to each of us to decide what we believe.
And as we move into the final part of our deep dive, think about the impact all of this has had, not just on those directly involved, but on everyone who's been touched by this case. So now we're getting to the part where things settle down in the courts. But with the verdicts coming in, it really stirs up a whole lot of feelings for everyone involved.
Yeah, you can really hear it in their voices in the podcast, especially from Teresa's family. Like, there's this sense of relief that justice has been served, but at the same time, it's clear that the pain of losing her is still so raw.
And it's not just about the loss itself. They went through years of this, the investigation, the trials, constantly reliving that horrible night.
And then on the flip side, you have Mark's family, and they're just devastated by the verdict. I mean, they are absolutely convinced that he's innocent, that this whole thing was a setup. They believe Wayne was the real killer and somehow managed to fool everyone.
It's a classic case of who do you believe?
Right. You've got these two families, once close, now completely torn apart by this tragedy, each clinging to their own version of the truth.
And it makes you realize that even in these high-profile cases with all the evidence and testimonies, there's always that element of human perception. It's like everyone involved sees the same events through their own lens, colored by their relationships and beliefs.
And one thing that just breaks my heart about this whole story is thinking about Teresa and Mark's two daughters. I mean, first, they lose their mother in this horrific way, and now their father is behind bars, potentially facing the death penalty. It's just a tragic situation all around, and those girls are going to be dealing with the consequences of this for the rest of their lives.
And it's not just the immediate family either. Think about all the friends, the colleagues, the community. Everyone touched by this case has been affected in some way.
Yeah, it's like a ripple effect. The impact of a crime like this goes far beyond the victim themselves. Speaking of impact, this case also brought up some really important questions about the role of technology in investigations.
Oh yeah, the digital trail, the GPS data, all of that played a huge role in getting those convictions. But it also makes you think about privacy, right?
Exactly. Like, on the one hand, it's amazing how technology can help solve crimes and bring justice to victims. But on the other hand, it's kind of unsettling to realize how much of our lives are being tracked and monitored these days.
It's a double-edged sword for sure. This case is a prime example of that. Our phones, our cars, our computers, We're constantly leaving a trail of digital breadcrumbs wherever we go.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What are some of the key takeaways you'd want our listeners to walk away with?
Well, first of all, I think it's a stark reminder that even those closest to us can be capable of things we never imagined. It makes you question those assumptions we make about people, especially the ones we trust.
It's a chilling thought for sure.
And I think it also highlights the importance of being aware of our digital footprint.
Hmm.
We live in a world where our every move can be tracked, so it's more important than ever to be mindful of what we're sharing and how we're protecting our privacy.
And at the end of the day, this case really forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about human nature.
The potential for greed, for betrayal, for violence. These are dark realities that exist even in the seemingly perfect lives we see on social media.
Yeah, it's a reminder that none of us are immune to those darker impulses. The murder of Dr. Teresa Severs is a story that will probably stay with us for a long time. It's a story about trust and betrayal, about the complexities of relationships, and about the enduring power of truth. We may never know for sure what happened that night, but the search for answers has revealed some disturbing truths about the people involved and about ourselves.
And sometimes those uncomfortable truths are the ones that resonate the most, the ones that stick with us long after the story is over.
Well, that's about it for our deep dive into the Teresa Severs case. Thanks for joining us as we tried to untangle this complex and tragic story.
And remember, keep those critical thinking skills sharp. Truth is often a slippery thing, and it's up to each of us to examine the evidence, weigh the different perspectives, and come to our own conclusions.
That's right. Always question, always dig deeper, and never take anything at face value. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay safe out there.